Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Trustwave Cybersecurity Virtual Workshop Transformation Journey for Financial Services Sector Post-COVID Next Gen Security Practices. So this is the last section for the workshop series, and we are pleased to have Mark Reed, the Associate Director from Singtel Cybersecurity Institute from Trustwave, to share more on the blue teaming. So, if you have any questions you would like to ask, so feel free to voice it out at the end of the Q&A section. And or if you want to be anonymously raise the questions, so you can drop me an email. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So yes, my name's Mark Reed. I work for the Cybersecurity Institute down in Singapore. We are a training facility. We provide, apart from the normal cybersecurity training, we also do other engagements such as tabletop exercises and cyber range exercises as well. Cyber range exercises is what I will be touching on in this presentation. So I understand that we've probably got a varied amount of security maturity on the call today. So I'm going to start off with the absolute basics, in case you're wondering what is red teaming, what is blue teaming, etc. So red teaming is essentially, it's not much different from penetration testing. It's basically penetration testing. There's a lot more focus. So if we look at the various vulnerability type assessments that we do here, starting at the bottom, your typical start off with straightforward vulnerability assessment. So this will be using automated tools to scan either individual systems or networks. The advantage of this is that's quick and easy. The disadvantage is that it spits out a report at the end that may or may not be accurate. There needs to be manual follow-up on that, and it doesn't go too depth. You're basically scanning the systems in your network that you tell it to scan. It's not going to go any further than that. It's not going to attempt to exploit these vulnerabilities and move laterally within the system itself. That's why you then have penetration testing done. So you will engage an external provider to do penetration testing on certain parts of your system, usually the web-based side of things. So again, they will use the same tools that are used within the vulnerability assessments. Depending upon the company that you engage, there may be a very thin line between a vulnerability assessment and a penetration test. Competent penetration testers will take the information that they get from those vulnerability assessments, confirm that the exploits and misconfigurations they found are indeed true, and then we'll try to actively exploit those, gain access to those systems to get a foothold, and then try and move laterally within the environment to see how far they can actually get in. Okay, penetration testing is typically noisy. The company will know about it. As far as your security operations center is concerned, they will be fully aware of it, and generally they will be told to avoid any alerts that are originating from particular IP addresses. What comes out at the end of the penetration test is a report which you then action on to try and resolve those vulnerabilities. Where red teaming is different is whereas penetration testing is more about trying to scan as many systems as possible to try and find as very many vulnerabilities as possible. Red teaming is a lot more focused. Red teaming will essentially be a lot more to life of what you would typically find from a hacker trying to gain access to an organization. They will find a vulnerability, they will exploit it, and then they will try and make a path through your network to where their goal actually is. So this is the difference between the red team assessments and penetration testing. Most organizations, penetration testing is something that you need to do. You need to be aware of what your potential vulnerabilities are. More advanced organizations will then look at the red teaming assessments. Where red teaming is also different is in the techniques that are used in order to achieve that goal. It's not just technical. They will employ things like social engineering, for example, to try and gain a foothold within the environment, or additional information. It will also be a lot more stealthy. which is a lot more true to life. As far as your security operations team is concerned, your analysts, typically, if the red teamer is doing their job well, they're going to find it very hard to find any evidence of them being within the environment itself. So that's essentially what the red teaming is. They are the attackers. On the blue team side, these are essentially your security operations center, your incident response teams, everyone within the organization that is essentially there to protect your assets. So we look at the analysts, the guys that are actually in the SOC themselves. They will be taking the alerts that are being raised by the various technologies that you have. They will be doing the initial line of investigation. They will be the ones that then decide when an alert becomes an actual incident. At that point, they will then escalate it to an incident response team that will then do more in-depth digital forensics, find out more about the incident itself, discovering where the attacker has come from, what are they going to. Okay, they will be a lot more technically in depth, and their job is to understand the bigger picture. So these are the guys within the blue team that are reactive to these incidents. Within the blue team, you also have groups that are also proactive. So threat intelligence, understanding what the current threat landscape is, what are the the big issues of the day out there, what type of state-sponsored attacks are prominent at the moment, what are the risks out there, what are other companies within your sector, what are they experiencing. It's all about sharing information. Based upon that, their job would be then to create new rules. So based upon what they know is happening out in the wild, what can they do within your environment, either of writing new IDS rules, for example, or ensuring that things that are actively being exploited in the wild, make sure that you're patched. This is where the threat intelligence guys come in. And then you have your threat hunters. So this is more for a more mature organization. They will be doing a more deep dive into things that are not necessarily an incident, but are being shown as potentially suspicious activity. So they will be the guys that are looking into not the alerts that are coming up. They're going to be looking at the things that are potential indicators of compromise of an attacker being within the system. So this is identifying those that are already in, and they are being very, very stealthy. Okay. So now we have that established. Most organizations, they will plan for the worst. Right, we do our regular fire drills, mainly because that's a legal requirement, but also disaster recovery and business continuity. We will do regular drills on those side to ensure that our plans can be enacted. So when the worst does happen, we are prepared for it. That said, many companies do very little as far as cyber attacks are concerned. It could be argued that we do that on a day-to-day basis. The SOC is constantly busy. They're constantly dealing with attacks. They're constantly doing their analysis. They're constantly responding to this. The metrics show that there's a large number of incidents, and those incidents are being successfully closed. The metrics are also showing that the type of attacks that are taking place, what the most common ones are, and therefore should be looking at concentrating on those particular areas. So the conclusion here would be that a busy and efficient SOC is an effective SOC, right? That priority should be given to mitigating those attacks that are most common, spend in those areas, build up the defenses in those particular areas. Those are the common thoughts in this area. We don't need to do the drills as we do with BCP or DR exercises, because this happens on a day-to-day basis. That is the common thought. So let's just talk about survivorship bias. So during World War II, the US military basically wanted to look at how they could build up the protection on their aircraft, adding increased armor. Obviously, you can't put armor on the entire of the aircraft, otherwise it's not going to fly. So they did statistical analysis of the planes that came back, of where were the bullet holes. So they saw that there's an awful lot of hit on the tail, tips of the wings, on the fuselage itself. So logically, those are the areas of where they should apply increased armor. What they didn't look at was that there was 0 hits on the engine, there were 0 hits on the cockpit, right? And the reason for that is that those planes that were hit in those areas just simply didn't return home, right? So, you know, by looking at these, you're potentially looking in the wrong area. So you can only respond to what you can see. So you can have attackers that are hitting you day in, day out, and you are successfully responding to those. But what are the ones that you don't see, right? How are you responding to those? So in most cases, opportunist attacks, those ones that are, you know, the script kiddies out there or worms, they are generally noisy. You are going to see those. Those are the ones that light up generally. The more targeted attacks tend to be a lot more stealthy. These are attacks that are specifically targeted at you as an organization. This is either organized crime looking to target you specifically, or state-sponsored attacks. There's a lot more skill involved there. The attackers will often spend a lot more time and a lot more money getting at what they need to get at. So they will be within an environment for, you know, weeks or even months. And these are the attacks that typically go completely unnoticed until either they make a mistake and it lights up something, or someone else within the environment comes along that's a lot more noisy and starts trampling over everything, that basically gives their cover away. These are the risks that you need to be more concerned about. These are the ones that end up doing the damage. When they finally pull the trigger, these are the ones that are the major escalations. So, red team exercises. So if we do a red team exercise by itself, and if you remember, red team exercises are, yeah, very similar to a penetration test. What does this give us? So it provides you with details of vulnerabilities within the infrastructure, okay, within systems, within processes. Okay, remember that as far as red team are concerned, they have a specific goal. They are going after your crown jewels. They have a set plan. They are not going to be scanning your entire of your environment, finding every single vulnerability. That's where penetration testing still comes in. Okay, what this is going to give you at the end is it will give your analysts an idea of what the indicators of compromise are. So they've got in, they've managed to successfully complete their task. They've got to your crown jewels. They've said, you've got a problem. The report will be provided of exactly where those problems were, the path that the red team took, and where the security needs to be increased in those particular areas. Okay. This tests the technology efficiency in detecting and defending. Okay, so during a red team exercise, you know, your technology will still be lighting up as far as, you know, there will be log events in there. There will be evidence of these guys within the system. How well does your technology stack up against that? Is there any particular gap as far as providing visibility is concerned? Okay. What the red team exercise actually gives you more over than what a penetration test gives is how far can an attacker actually go within your environment. Now let's add the blue team into the mix. So if we have a red team exercise and we now ensure that the blue team are there, so we are now simulating a live attack from a a real attacker. So what this now gives you is, on top of the benefits of the red team exercise alone, is that you now find out where the additional gaps are as far as people and process are concerned. Okay, so when these red and blue team exercises occur, there will be a number of people within the organization that are aware of it, but your first responders will not be aware. Okay, they will be essentially treating this as though it is a actual live attack. So how do they react? Okay, are your processes, are your incident response processes, up to task? Did they follow the right processes for these types of attacks that you may have not necessarily seen before? Okay. This also challenges the attacker as well. So if you want to test the red team, having the blue team in the mix that is now trying to shut them down now tests the red team. This also then provides the benefit also that by shutting down a particular path that the red team was initially going to take, they are now going to try and look for additional vulnerabilities and look for alternative paths to get to their goal. So again, this will now highlight that if path A wasn't available, right, because you've now fixed that, is there a path B? Is there a path C? Okay, this also tests the blue team's effectiveness in reacting and investigating and essentially defending. What you don't get by adding the blue team into the mix is seeing how far the attacker can actually go if they were completely unnoticed within the environment. Because you've now got the blue team actively trying to stop the attacker, they may not necessarily get to the goal, as opposed to just having the red team by itself. So the question comes, where do you run these exercises? So the logical thought would be on your live production environment. It's it's a real environment, but the problems come with the risk to availability and integrity on there. When most companies do a penetration test, there will be a rules of engagement of you must not exploit this. You must not make any changes to any of the systems itself. Okay, this is where it differs from a red team exercise. Red team exercise, everything is pretty much game. Okay, so if the red team want to do something as far as bringing any particular systems down, or it's just par for the course of they're trying different attacking methodologies that ends up bringing a system down, then yes, that may potentially happen. Making changes to the system, yes, they will certainly do this. They will be installing additional tools, things like keyboard loggers, for example, because they now want to start capturing further information. They are going to be making changes to systems. So the risks do exist if you are running this within a production network. At the same time, if you are checking to make sure that your systems are up to scratch, your security is up to scratch, then this is exactly where you need to do it, on your production environment. Okay, this is all about testing your systems and your infrastructure, whilst also testing your people and process at the same time. The alternative is in what's called a cyber range. So essentially, a cyber range is just a completely isolated network that is set up to look and feel like your live production network. Okay, so this can either be physical with physical firewalls, physical switches, or purely virtual. But for all intents and purposes, it will use the same hardware and software that you typically use within your production environment. The topology of the network will be very similar to your production environment. Okay, this provides a network where the red and blue teams can essentially battle it out in safety. Okay. It is a simulated environment. Okay, it will closely represent your production network. it cannot replicate all of the assets and the configurations that are in your network itself, unless you've got an awful lot of money and an awful lot of patience to essentially set up a complete mirror of your production environment. That said, some of the configuration may be missed. So it will never ever be 100%. Okay. You can't replicate all the vulnerabilities and potential attack vectors, again, unless it is a complete mirror of your production environment, running exactly the same version of every single software, with end users also doing exactly what they would do on a normal day-to-day basis as well. Okay. This is a place where you can test attacks that would normally be extremely disruptive, those ones that would typically bring systems down. You're certainly not going to do a live test of a ransomware outbreak on your live production network. So this is the place to do it, because it offers the flexibility. And you can set the cyber range up in the way that you want to set it up, based upon what you want to get out of it, and also how you are mature as an organization. Also, as part of this, you are also testing the people and process again. So it's not just the technology, it's also now looking at what your playbooks are, what your standard operating processes are, your incident response plans, and enacting this out live. So as far as flexibility is concerned, what you can do is not set it up like you're in production environment, okay, depending upon what your outcome is. If you want to challenge the red team, if you want to give your red team more opportunity to test their abilities, try out more sophisticated attacks, then the way to do that is to increase restrictions within the environment. Have very granular firewall rules. Increase the amount of detection in there, include, whereas you would only have specific points for IDS within your current production environment, put them absolutely everywhere. See if they can avoid being detected. Likewise, increase the prevention in there. Your automated systems, your IPSs, have those shutting them down, a lot more than they would within your production environment. You can have a lot more granular controls there, particularly ones that you wouldn't even dare turn on within a production environment. And also make sure everything is absolutely patched up, everything is restrictive, decrease the amount of vulnerabilities within the network itself. See what they can do in a very limited environment. So obviously this is really only applicable if you have an internal red team. If you're outsourcing this to another company, you don't want to be doing this, right? They will be doing this themselves. What you will be looking at is more on challenging your blue team. So challenging your SOC, challenging your first responders, your incident responders, your digital forensics teams. So by doing that, by decreasing the restrictions, this now gives the red team more opportunity to do a lot more different things within the environment, okay, and also be a lot more stealthy than they normally would be as well. Yeah, decreasing the detection and the prevention side of things, again, allows them to start going into places, being a lot more stealthy. Also increase the number of vulnerabilities in there, put unpatched systems within the environment. This tests the blue team on how would they deal with a particular situation where it's not just one or two systems that they see being compromised, but potentially a lot more. How are they going to deal in that type of situation? So having a cyber range environment allows you this flexibility to focus where you want to be tested or where you want to increase the amount of education in a particular area. So when we look at effective defense, it's not just the technology, as I stated. You can have all the firewalls, your IPSs, IDSs, EDRs, you can have your SIEMs, user behavioral analysis, everything in the mix, but that means absolutely nothing unless you've got the people to understand what they are seeing. Okay, they need the ability to be able to understand, what are indicators of compromise? What are they looking for? They cannot rely on the technology and the rules in there to tell them that this is a bad thing, you need to do this, right? For certain sets, scenarios, yes, that works. But for the more, detailed stealthy attacks, that does not. These are not going to be, ringing the alarm bells. They need to understand, where potentially they need to investigate further. They need a deep technical understanding. They need to be not just staring at a screen and reacting to alerts and just following standard playbooks. They need to understand what they are seeing. They need to understand from the attacker's side, what is in their mindset? What are the techniques that an attacker would use? And by using those techniques, what are the indicators of compromise? What are they seeing on systems? One technique that attacker will use to try and evade detection is by erasing logs. So do you see gaps in the logs? That's a potential indicator of compromise. They need to understand what the goal is. So within the organization, where are the crown jewels? What potentially could the attacker be going after? They need to understand where the attacker has come from. What path through the network have they come in order to shut that down for future occurrences? But more importantly, where are they going to next? Because this is likely to be an ongoing situation. They may not have achieved their goal yet. So you need to understand where are they going and why are they going there? Ultimately, what is their end goal? Because if you can get to your end goal first and put all your defenses in place there, then it will stop them achieving their objectives. And then process. So having playbooks in place, right? Being prepared for the worst. So you will have set scenarios in place, such as, a ransomware outbreak. You will have your playbooks for that so that you're not making things up when the worst occurs. You already know what you are going to do. You have these processes in place, and communication is also key as well. So the number of organizations that have great technology in place, they have people that are smart, they know exactly what they're doing, but if communication breaks down, then everything breaks down. When it comes to an incident, there are a lot of teams involved, and communication between those teams is key. And again, this is where a cyber range exercise brings all of this together to actually test you. So in addition, this provides you with an environment to do the proactive threat hunting side of things as well. Again, not knowing, by not knowing what's in your environment, you don't know what you're looking for. By seeing both sides of the coin, you know what to look for, you know what the indicators of compromise are, and therefore that is a learning opportunity. You have your live instant response. How are you reacting to this unfolding crisis? And then after the event, you have the post-mortem, understanding how this occurred in the first place. Again, by having these red team and blue team exercises, you are seeing both sides of the story. Normal day-to-day life, as far as the blue team is concerned, you're only seeing one side, right? You may see that there's a compromise. Some of your data is now out there on the dark web being sold. You do not understand how it got there, okay? You need to be able to do the investigation and understand this. The advantage of having these red and blue team exercises is you can now ask the red team. You're working together. If there's a part of it that, as far as the investigation is concerned, not quite sure, how did you manage to do that? You have the opportunity to actually ask the attackers. And this is the advantage of running these exercises. In addition, so as I said, you can test your people. You can test the technical skills of your people, but as far as your incident response processes are concerned, unless you're actually acting them, it's difficult to tell whether they're effective or not. And in most cases, you don't want to be in a position that you are enacting them out. So whilst you will have various playbooks for certain situations, ransomware, for example, you pray that you never get to test that. Within the cyber range, you do get to test that. You do get to find where the gaps are in that process before you actually have to do it for real life. Okay. It also allows you to demonstrate to your internal, external stakeholders that everything is good, right? Your processes are working as they should be. Your technology is working as it should be. Your people are working as it should be. Okay. And finally, where you've done these exercises, no one is perfect. There is going to be room for improvement. So the after action report that comes out at the end of this will give guidance for the areas that are room for improvement. So this gives you then an opportunity to focus on those areas before then repeating this again. Most companies will do this on an annual basis. And they will then be tested on those areas that they were seen lacking previously. So that's the advantages that we have there. So before I come to the end here, just want to add a couple more colours into the mix as well. You may have heard the term purple teaming. So essentially what this is red and blue teaming, but rather than working in isolation for the period of the exercise, they are working together. They are sitting together, and they will typically concentrate on one particular area. It may be a particular system. The red guys will attack that system. The blue guys will try and defend it. They will then work together on a step-by-step basis as to, well, how can I now defend this? Well, I've made this change. Can you now successfully attack it again? And then we'll then work on that as a step-by-step basis. So this is great for conducting more complex what-if scenarios. This is great for your critical assets that you want to ensure are as secure as possible. So rather than looking everything generically, concentrating on one area, just having that single sit down with both teams to thrash things out. And then there's a whole load of other colors as well for when you start increasing maturity as an organization. So already gone through what the red and blue side are. Purple I've just discussed. The yellow team is your builders. So they are your developers. They are your solution architects. They are the ones that build the systems within your network. The orange team is there to work with the red team and the yellow team to essentially provide education to the guys that are building out your network. Get them to understand the ramifications of doing things in a certain way that may open you up to attack. It's important for the people that are building the infrastructure to have a security first mindset. The green team joins the blue team with the yellow team. They are the ones that puts policies and frameworks in place. They're the ones that say you can do this, you cannot do this. So as you mature as an organization, this is where you now start having all of the teams working together with the overall security objective being the white team. Okay, I'll just open up now for any questions.
Hello, Mark. This is Aston. May
Hi.
I know for the red teaming service, is any limitation when when you are going to conduct a red teaming? I mean, for the limitation like the infrastructure, cloud environment, or some technology limitation?
The limitation will be only as much as your budget affords, essentially. So typically there are different cyber range exercises that can be done. There are companies out there that have their entire infrastructure in the cloud. Okay, and they will be limited to the technologies that you can use within those. They may or may not emulate your production environment. Or you can have ones that are physical infrastructures that are on premises. They can basically be built up with whatever technologies that you want to add into that. As far as red teaming is concerned, the gap in the market at the moment is actually testing of cloud infrastructures. So you'll have the cyber range providers that are hosting their cyber ranges in the cloud, but it's not testing the cloud infrastructure itself. A lot of these are still very much focused on on-prem type networks. You know, your hard perimeter, soft on the inside, your typical data center environments. There are none that I know of at the moment that focus purely on a cloud environment such as AWS or Azure, for example, because cloud does things completely different. Right, they take a zero trust approach first. There are technologies in the cloud that you typically won't find on-prem. The way that identity and access management is done is typically different in the cloud than it is done on-prem, for example. Misconfigurations. I mean, one of the biggest misconfigurations out there as far as cloud is concerned that everyone has fallen foul of is Amazon S3 buckets open up to the public, for example, and gaining access to all sorts of information on there. That's not the sort of thing that you can emulate like for like within a on-prem environment, because it's very much the way that it's configured is very unique to Amazon, for example. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's very clear. Thank you.
Great.
Mark, I have received a few questions from audience previously. Maybe I can ask you first.
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned about red teaming and blue teaming. So which one is more important?
Okay. That's yeah. Both of them are as important as each other. I did read somewhere that someone commented that the way to look at it is, what is more important, a fire safety inspector or a fireman? It can be argued that they're both as important as each other. If a fire and safety inspector spots something that is a fire risk and prevents that fire in the first place, then there's no need for the firefighters at all. But obviously in the real world, that never happens. Accidents happen. You need your firefighters. So they are as important as each other. As far as priorities are concerned, for most companies, they will look obviously to build up their blue team first. And then they will outsource the red teaming side of things. So most companies, even with low security maturity, will get an annual pen test done anyway. So essentially, they're already looking at the red team side of things. As they mature, as they build up their blue team, because remember, blue team is more than just your security operations center, right? There's a whole load of other things there. They may look to outsource the SOC initially to a security provider, okay, before then potentially bringing that in-house. As far as their incident response is concerned, and the digital forensic side of things, again, they may look to outsource that rather than having in-house to begin with as well. So I would say building up of the blue team is probably the priority first. But when you get to that level of maturity, absolutely, you should be looking at insourcing the red teaming side of things as well. But until then, do not ignore the red team side of things. Keep having the penetration tests done. And when you think that you've got to that right level of maturity, look to engage a company to go beyond penetration testing and having a red team exercise done. And typically you would do that once you have insourced your SOC, okay, and various other elements of the blue team, so that you can test where you are standing, as far as the response side is concerned.
Okay, so different testing or teaming is actually for different need for the organization. So if a company does red teaming exercise, so is it necessary to do the pen test?
Yes, yeah. So as I touched on earlier, the pen tests are looking about finding as many vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in a network as possible, right? Highlighting every potential angle that an attacker could take advantage of. Whereas red teaming is more focused. Once the red teamer has found a vulnerability, um, they're not going to look for other vulnerabilities on that same line unless that's the route they want to take. They are more about taking a route through the network rather than scanning every single part of that network itself. So even if you do have red team exercises performed, it's still important to have regular penetration tests done as well.
Okay, got it. One last question for you, Mark.
Mhm.
So, the pandemic has been over a year or more. So, given the current situation, are cyber range exercises effective if done remotely? And is it important for retail or other industries or to do this exercise?
So doing remotely is quite difficult. Again, it depends on what you want to get out of this. If you're looking at purely testing the technology, then yes, it absolutely can be done. And you should be looking on doing an exercise that is of a very small team. So looking anywhere up to about 10 people, and looking at how they detect the attacks. What are the indicators of compromise? Are they able to understand where the point of entry was? Do they understand where the attacker was going? Did they successfully thwart the attack? So if you're looking purely on the technology side, yes, absolutely, that can be done remotely. If you are looking to be testing on your incident response as a whole, so that includes the technology, people, and process, that is obviously going to involve a lot more teams than just your analysts or your forensics guys, right? This involves absolutely everyone, from those technology teams through to managers, through to your corporate communications, through to legal potentially, testing everyone, having everyone on a remote session. That is very, very difficult to do, as far as a cyber range exercise is concerned, because as part of the cyber range exercise, you will have what's called blue team coaches. They will be looking at how the teams are reacting, how they're communicating, how they are doing on the technology side of things, and they will be providing advice. Okay, they also need to be able to report at the end of how well people did. When you're dealing with lots of different teams that will be in individual breakout rooms on, Zoom, for example, or Teams, unless you've got a lot of those observers, it's very, very difficult to do, and you won't be able to observe the entire session. So I would say that, if you're purely looking at technology, absolutely. If you want to do it as a whole, hold off until you're able to get everyone back in the same room together. As far as other industries are concerned, yes, absolutely, everyone should be doing this. It's not just focused at particular sectors or particular types of organizations. Everyone out there is open to attack. Okay, some are more open than others. Some are more of the target than others. But if you look at ransomware as an example, in a lot of cases, unless it's targeted, a lot of the time it's opportunistic. It depends on who the attacker type of attacker is. Whether it's politically motivated, whether it's financially motivated, whether it's a space-sponsored attack. So as with every company getting penetration tests done now as part of standard, red teaming should certainly be something that's in your vision. Certainly testing your blue team is absolutely paramount. There's no point having your blue team there when you think that they're effective, when in fact they're not. They need to be tested.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So, is there any questions for Mark? If not, then maybe I can wrap this up. So thank you, Mark, for the very impressive sharing. So now I learned more than just blue, red, and purple teaming, but now I also learned yellow builder, and now also add a green or orange
So
team.
many colors.
Yes, indeed. So that's very impressive, though. So thank you, Mark, for the insightful sharing, and also thank you everyone for the continued support. So hope can see you all in a physical event very soon. So have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.